Chapter 4082. Yi Mulin unbuckled the seatbelt and carried her onto his lap. By Shueli screamed, "Yi Mulin, what are you doing? Didn't you say that I like you a lot? Of course, I'm going to like you." Yi Mulin did not do anything immediately. He paused for a moment, and the little person in the back seat opened the door and got out, leaving the space for his father to do whatever he wanted. Bai Shueli was furious. Bai Anan pretended not to hear anything and ran away quickly. Yi Mulin held the steering wheel with one hand and pinched his little worm's chin with the other, playing with it. "I want to get off the car." Bai Shueli struggled on his body, but accidentally ignited his anger. She was stunned for a moment and then looked down at the unbearable spot under the expensive clothes. "You, shameless." Her face was a little red as she scolded him. Yi Mulin was still slow and chuckled. "You're not a man if I don't react to you like this." Actually, he had not touched her for a few days, mainly because he was too busy. Every night, he would return home at 2 a.m. and wake up at 6 a.m. He could see her throughout the day. Bai Shueli was almost asleep. She had not seen him for a few days, but the traces of sleep on the pillow in the morning showed that he had been back. Today was the day when he was slightly free. Of course, he was filled with anger. "You're so shameless." She gritted her teeth. "You're so beautiful outside. Do you even care about the occasion?" He chuckled, deliberately teasing her, and even pulled her hand. Of course, Bai Shueli did not want to. She was shocked and angry, but she did not dare to make a sound, afraid that others would hear. He looked at her for a while and felt that this was not the place. In the end, he let her go. "Get out first. I'll wait for a while." When Bai Shueli jumped out of the car, her legs were a little weak. She made a face at him. "I'll let you have your eyes." He was still sitting in the car, wearing a classic black suit. He was handsome, and his face was slightly restrained because of the love jade. He looked very restrained and seductive. Bai Shueli looked at him and gulped. Suddenly, she felt that her husband was a feast for the eyes. Yi Mulin was still sitting in the car with his long arms and legs, smiling. "You can't bear to leave me. Do you want to get in the car?" "No way." In the end, the rice worm resisted the temptation and backed away. She even made a face at him and called him a pervert. Yi Mulin smiled. He sat in the car and smoked a cigarette to soothe the Yu Wang in his body. Then he got out of the car. He tidied himself up and made sure that there were no problems before he walked into the hall. That little idiot thought that he could fall in love with anyone. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth. It was a smile that only a man who had lived a good life would have. Being with Shirley might be a little harder, but it would be more fun. He was willing to do it, and he had no regrets. Entering the living room, Gue Saw had already prepared the dishes on the table. The house was bustling, but the livelier it was, the less one person there was. Yi Zhengang felt a little lonely, and this loneliness was due to the absence of Su Fu. After dinner, before his two sons left, he went upstairs and called his ex-wife. Su Fu picked up. "The children are all here. These few little ones have been staying with me for the past few days. If you miss them, come over with Hao Yun." Yi Zhengang sighed. He actually missed her. Because he owed her, and because he missed her, he could only accept Hao Yun's existence. Chapter 4083. He even thought about competing to see who could live longer. If Hao Yun couldn't outlive him, he might still have a chance to get back together. Even if he could be buried with Su Fu in the end, it would still be good. But he was clear that it was unlikely to happen in this lifetime. Hao Yun lived as he wished, but he was alone now. How could he survive? Actually, so what if he was buried in the same place? Su Fu already had Hao Yun in her heart, and he, Yi Zhengang, was already a thing of the past. He didn't notice what Su Fu said, but when he went downstairs, his eyes were a little moist. The livelier it was, the lonelier it was. It was said that people like Yi Zhengang, who had fallen from prosperity, had nothing in the end. It seemed like he had a house full of children and grandchildren, but in fact, he had lost the most important person in his life. Su Fu, the only woman who amazed him, was still lost by him. So, he hoped that his sons would be well and not follow his old path. He called his second son, Yi Mubai, to the study and gave him a good lecture. Yi Mubai understood that he was reminded of his mother. In this matter, it was Yi Zhenggang's fault, But how could he not be lonely now? Dad, there's nothing between me and Wen Yuan. I can't say anything about the past, but I've never thought of hurting Wen Yuan. It's gone after we got married. I can guarantee this. Yi Mubai smiled faintly. Yi Jinggan's expression was a little heavy. After a while, he let out a deep breath. Mubai, if you love her, then treat her well. Don't lose her. If you lose her, you won't be able to find her again. Dad, Yi Mubai whispered, find someone to take care of you. Yi Jinggang was a little stunned. After a long time, he waved his hand. No need. In terms of taking care of me, no one can take care of me better than your mother. No need. I'm not used to others. Even though he said this, his heart was indescribably sad. It was lonely to be alone. With more people, it was even more lonely. Instead, he missed Su Fu even more. His heart ached a little, but he would never forget the pain. Yi Mubai didn't know what to say. He had left with Yi Mulan. The children stayed behind, and the couple found a place to have a few drinks. They chose a high-class bar with a membership system and chatted in the dark. Bai Shiwili and Wen Yuan talked privately. The two women talked about Lu Man and Yi Mubai's past affairs. You're saying that old Bai had a vasectomy and used his finger to make Lu Man pregnant? Bai Shiwili lowered her voice and said, it's insider news. I heard that Lao Bai has undergone a vasectomy. Wen Yuan, you know about it, right? Wen Yuan looked at her for a while and lowered his head. Lu Man doesn't know. Bai Shiwili's voice was like a sheep's. She did it on purpose. I don't know what she did, but she had an illegitimate child. She wanted to drag Mubai down with her. By the way, why didn't Mubai announce to the public that he had a vasectomy? Wen Yuan smiled. A vasectomy can only prove that the child isn't Mubai's, but can't prove that he and Lu Man never had sex. Bai Shiwili whispered, that's true. What should we do? Wen Yuan smiled. There's nothing we can do. Not responding is the best response. I think Lu Man will either find someone to take over or abort the child herself. She can't blame anyone. Seeing her like this, Bai Shiwili felt relieved. Wen Yuan's voice was soft. Shiwili, actually, I can understand her very well, because I've done crazy things to Mubai before. End of this chapter. Chapter 4084. She almost gambled everything she had in exchange for a chance. In the end, she got together with him as she wished. She knew how much pain she had suffered, how many tears she had shed, and how much heartache she had experienced. It wasn't that she didn't mind his past, but that she couldn't afford to mind it. In love, whoever fell in love first was the weaker party and the loser. The only way to turn the tables was to wait for the other party to fall in love with you. Yi Mubai loved her after she had Yi Hui, especially before they got married. She couldn't afford to fuss about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to live a good life. Wen Yuan knew what she wanted very well. The policy would be tight when it was necessary, and she would let it go when it was necessary to relax. That was why she had minded Lu Man entering Star's Entertainment. Now, it proved that her decision was right. Once she entered, it wouldn't be as simple as it was today. Bai Shiwili was relieved. She looked up and saw her husband looking at her. His eyes were very clear, as if he was going to eat her. Of course, he was going to eat her tonight. The worm knew that if she didn't listen to him and go home with him, she would be miserable tonight. So she jumped down. I'll go back first. You and old Bai should go home early too. Wen Yuan nodded and said goodbye to Yi Mulan. Yi Mubai drank the wine in front of him and walked over to hold her hand. Let's go home too. Wen Yuan looked at him. Let's go back to the villa, okay? Why do you suddenly want to go back to the villa? Didn't you just move out? His smile was indulgent and doting. Wen Yuan tilted his head. Then let's go shopping and then go to a hotel. Are you sure about a hotel? He stared at her, but didn't give her time to refuse. He quickly booked a 5-star super presidential suite, the kind that cost more than 100,000 yuan a night. He didn't even blink and booked it for 3 days in a row. We'll stay there for 3 days, miss one. Let's be in love. He smiled. Wen Yuan's face was a little red. We just need to be in love and hold hands. We don't need to stay in a hotel. Why don't we stay separately and go home separately? Adults have a different way of falling in love. He grabbed her hand and took a bite. What do you think, Miss Wen? Wen Yuan hugged his arm. Let's go to a movie, then I want to eat some snacks and take a walk to the hotel. This was what being in love looked like. Yi Bai smiled faintly and didn't say anything. He just put his arm around her and walked out. Outside the clubhouse, there was a flash of white light. He knew that he had been secretly photographed. He stretched out his hand to block Wen Yuan's face from being photographed. He was a little annoyed that they were being disrespectful to Wen Yuan. He did not want to deal with Lu Man's matter because it had nothing to do with him. Everything was Lu Man's one-woman show. However, he did not want Wen Yuan to be implicated in this kind of scandal. She was someone he wanted to cherish. Therefore, his bodyguard in the dark pulled out the person who took the photo and smashed the camera into pieces. Yi Bai, on the other hand, held Wen Yuan in his arms and went to enjoy the two of them. The feeling of being in love was indeed very good. On the other hand, the eldest son of the Yi family and his family's rice worm were in love every day. Even Bai Ainan's existence couldn't affect the couple's passion. Bai Shiuli was the one who drove the car back. Yi sat beside her with a lazy expression on his face. She knew that he had not rested for a long time. He had been busy for about a month, going abroad and visiting the south. He was exhausted. "I'll make you a tonic when we get back," she said in her little sheep voice as she drove. Oh, ever since she married him, Bai Shiuli had also become younger. Yi supported his chin with his clean and slender fingers and smiled. "I'll cook for you tonight." Chapter 4085. When the little sheep heard that, she knew that it was not going to be an ordinary night. Her face was a little red, and she whispered after a long time, "Yi, can't you control yourself? You want me to control myself?" His voice was hoarse. "I worked so hard for this job, but I can't even hug my wife to my heart's content. What do you think is the meaning of my life?" Riceworm coughed and tried to reason with him. "You can't say it like that. Think about it. There are many things in life that you have to do. For example, make love." He continued. Bai Shiuli thought, "There's no way to talk about this anymore." They were an old couple, so they were familiar with everything. When they returned to the villa, he carried her into the bedroom. The servants all avoided him. When they reached the bedroom, the riceworm was taught a lesson by the leader. She felt that he was really energetic today. She couldn't stand it anymore, so she put her arms around his neck and praised him. She knew best what he liked to hear. Usually, he would let her go if she had this awareness. However, it was different today. No matter how she begged, he still trapped her under his body and did it again and again. After that, Yi kissed the fine sweat on her forehead and said hoarsely, "I'm going to take you for a bath." She said, "I want to soak for a while. It's sour everywhere." She looked at him with a complaining look. Yi smiled. Later, when he was soaking her in the hot water, he said slowly, "When I was socializing with old Zhou and the others at noon, the wine was quite strong." Bai Shiuli caught the hint and grabbed his arm. "They have found a girl." He didn't deny it and looked at her with a smile. He reached out to rub her round earlobe and blew a hot breath on her side. "Your man has been enduring for the whole afternoon. You can also find a girl," she said gloomily. Yi laughed. "You said it out of anger again." He pulled her to his body and said in a low voice, "If I find someone else, I won't be as energetic as I am now." His action scared her so much that she pressed against his shoulder. "Don't." He slowly tried not to scare her and said in a low voice, "Bear with it." In the end, he was so aroused that he pulled her into his embrace and kissed her lips with all his might. Actually, it wasn't the dragon tiger wine at all. The moment it touched her, he couldn't resist it anymore. Furthermore, he hadn't done it in a long time. After another 2 rounds in the bathroom, Bai Shiuli was so exhausted that she could barely walk. He carried her to the bedroom to rest and bent down to kiss her lips. "I'm going downstairs. I'll call you later." Bai Shiuli immediately wrapped her arms around his neck. "No, I'm not hungry." "I'm hungry, Mrs. Yi. We've done it so many times that I'm starving," he said with a smile. He always felt that being with her was not enough, and he laughed at himself in his heart. He still went to the kitchen. This was the most luxurious villa district. The lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the kitchen were brightly lit, and he could see the swimming pool outside. It was as blue as the blue sky, and there were other villas in the distance. The night was quiet. Yi stood below, his expression relaxed. In his current position, it was extremely rare for him to relax. Only when he was with Xue Li could he feel both physical and mental joy. Being in a high position, he somewhat understood Yi Jinggong's choice in the past. Power was indeed charming, and it was easy for people to get lost. However, he would never do that because to him, the biggest temptation in this life was by Xue Li. Chapter 4086. She was a messy, lazy, and stupid person, but he wanted to give her a lot. Even if he had to give up everything he had, he wanted to make her happy. They didn't have any more children. On the one hand, he didn't want her to bear the pain of childbirth. On the other hand, he wanted to enjoy the married life. Yes, enjoy. He didn't feel it was hard at all. He enjoyed it. A pair of slender arms wrapped around his waist from behind. The face of the little woman who had endured too much was pressed against his back. She said softly, "Yi Mulin, you are so good." She remembered that when she used to follow behind Lao Bai, Yi Mulin would always look at her with disdain, as if she was the stupidest creature in the world. Actually, he was the stupidest. There were so many capable, smart, and beautiful women, but he chose her. "You know I'm good?" His voice was really charming. It had a unique masculine tone. Bai Xueli smiled and asked softly, "How did you feel on the day of our wedding?" He married her for Lao Bai. She remembered that his face was stinky at that time. Yi Mulin paused and chuckled. "You were secretly happy," Bai Xueli said. "Can you be more serious?" "On the night of our wedding, I think I raped you. Is that considered serious?" He teased her on purpose. Bai Xueli was furious. "What rape? You obviously don't know how to do it. You're a rookie." That day, she was in so much pain that he took his pants and went on a business trip. Yi Mulin was still smiling. He put the noodles in 2 exquisite bowls and put one in his wife's hand. His voice was filled with love. "Are you comfortable now?" Bai Xueli. Other than blushing, there is nothing else. Carrying his own bowl, he ran to the small dining room to eat, eating with relish. Yi Mulin didn't eat immediately. Instead, he leaned on the side and smoked a cigarette. He looked at her eating happily and felt satisfied. After smoking a cigarette, he came over to eat with her. Bai Xueli finished eating and didn't want to leave. She looked at him eagerly. "I will wash the dishes later." "Leave it. Let Annie do it tomorrow," he said lightly. Bai Xueli didn't want to. "It will be done in a while. It won't take much time." As soon as she said this, the eldest of the Yi family looked up at her and said very slowly, "Wait, I still want to do it 2 more times. Accompany me." "Ah," Bai Xueli almost screamed and wanted to run away. As he ate, he caught her with one hand and easily pulled her over to sit on his lap. He finished the noodles in a few bites and carried his little girl back to the bedroom. Bai Xueli kept punching him with her fists. "I knew it. It's not good." He did this every time. If he still wanted to do it, he would say that he would give her the noodles next time to make her feel touched. It could also be considered as an intermission. "He's so bad, boo-hoo." The eldest brother of the Yi clan chuckled. "The noodles are not tasty, so I'll feed you something good, huh?" "It's your favorite." Bai Xueli blushed and glared at him. "I don't have a favorite. How about I do it? I'm also your favorite." He chuckled hoarsely and kissed her for a long time. He only succeeded when he kissed her softly. That night, he was very satisfied. At the same time, the second son of the Yi family was also satisfied. He brought Wen Yuan back to their villa. It was also a gentle night. In such a gentleness, it was as if Lu Man and everything in the past no longer existed, and there were only the 2 of them. They slept until it was almost 10 o'clock. He had to go to the company, so he got up and put on his clothes. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 4087. New Wife Number 1. "Hubby, I'm addicted to pampering." Latest chapter. When Yuan woke up. "Get up and come to the company with me. I'll ask the driver to take you to school, or you can go see Suimo." He kissed her. When Yuan thought for a moment. "I'll go see Suimo." After all, the matter was right there. So she still asked, "What do you say about Lu Man?" Nothing like that happened. Yi Mubai's voice was very soft. "When Yuan, I won't admit it, but I don't want to kick her when she's down. Let's just let it be." When Yuan thought about it and felt that it was true. If Yi Mubai used Lu Man's matter to bring benefits to himself, it would be too unkind and ungentlemanly. He wouldn't explain and just ignore it. She got up. Yi Mubai made breakfast and lunch for her. He planned to take her to eat something good in the evening. The car drove into the hospital, and he dropped her off. He went to the company for a meeting. Wen Yuan went to see Su Mo, but he didn't expect to meet Lu Man. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Lu Man looked a lot more haggard. However, when she saw Wen Yuan, she immediately got into a fighting stance. Wen Yuan could only sigh in his heart, but he still went up to her. "Do you have time?" Lu Man asked. Wen Yuan saw her hand on her waist, as if she was very concerned about the child in her belly. She thought that she should give the child justice and at least let Lu Man know the truth before making a choice. They chose a coffee shop. Wen Yuan ordered a cup of matcha and Lu Man a cup of water. Wen Yuan sipped the coffee and said in a low voice, "You plan to give birth?" Lu Man looked at him and said very slowly, "Yes, I'll give birth. Do you want this child, or do you want to disgust me? You know that Mubai won't admit this child." Wen Yuan's voice became even lower. Lu Man's lips trembled. "But it's Yi Mubai's child. We had sex at the award ceremony in Hong Kong." Wen Yuan didn't say anything. Not long ago, Yi Mubai went there, and so did Lu Man. They were talking about cooperation at that time, so when Lu Man said that they had sex and had a child, she couldn't refute it. However, Lu Man didn't think of this. Mubai has had a vasectomy. Even if he slept with you 100 times, he would never let you have a child. Wen Yuan's voice was very soft. "Lu Man, I don't mean to win by telling you this. I just want you to make the right choice." Lu Man was stunned. She couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. She stared at Wen Yuan and said, "Are you lying to me?" "No. After I gave birth to Yi Hui, he had a vasectomy because we didn't want children anymore." Wen Yuan said quietly, "So this child can't be his. As for whether or not the two of you slept together, I think you know best, Lu Man. You have the best resources. Why waste your youth on a man who doesn't belong to you?" Lu Man's face was still pale. After a long time, she said hoarsely, "I don't believe it." "It's up to you whether you want to believe it or not. You can also give birth to a DNA test. You should understand the results." Wen Yuan's voice was gentle. "Lu Man, this is a child. You shouldn't use it as a tool. Whether you want to give birth or not, it's up to you. But when a child is born, you have to give it motherly love because you decided to give birth to it." After she finished speaking, she stood up and said, "Let's stop here. I don't think you're that stupid." Lu Man sat and waited for Wen Yuan to take a few steps before she suddenly asked, "Why did you tell me? Wouldn't it be better if you didn't tell me? You hate me, don't you?" Chapter 4088. Wen Yuan shook his head. "I don't hate you, nor do I want to see you make a fool of yourself. Lu Man, I'm just a woman who wants to protect her marriage. I'm not wrong. You're the one who's wrong. Don't forget, Yi Mubai is already married. It was Lu Man's choice to reap what she sowed. She wouldn't die if she didn't ask for it. Whether she gave birth to the child or not, she would bear the consequences. Yi Mubai would at most be disturbed by the rumors, but the truth would be revealed in the end. So, it was stupid to use one's self and one's life to take revenge or plot against others. Wen Yuan wouldn't. If this man didn't love her anymore, she would leave without hesitation. So, the one who was loved would be fearless. Lu Man was a loser. She never got anything and had too many delusions. Perhaps she didn't love Yi Mubai that much. She just couldn't stand the fact that a man didn't care about her. She couldn't stand losing to Wen Yuan, who had no fame at all. Wen Yuan left. Lu Man was still sitting quietly, her hand caressing her stomach. There was really a life here. The father of the child was a rich businessman, but he wouldn't allow her to give birth. Now, she could only abort the child. She couldn't bear the risk of being a single mother. She wanted to be an international star. But after the abortion incident, after the scandal, she was no longer the Lu Man of the past. She didn't accept any films, didn't go on any variety shows, and was almost banned. Later, she realized how stupid she was. Yi Mubai had Yi Mulan behind her. How could she think that she could escape unscathed? Lu Man disappeared from B-City and from the entertainment industry. She lost terribly. Wen Yuan came to Sumo's ward. Sumo listened quietly and said softly, "She's just too conceited. I never thought that Lu Man would be such a reckless person." Wen Yuan smiled faintly. That's probably true love. What true love? She's just trying to find the best path after weighing the pros and cons. This kind of person isn't worthy of sympathy. I bet she'll abort the child. Suemo sat up, his face pale. I heard through the grapevine that she's very close to the CEO of a corporation. The child's success belongs to that person, yet you still want CEO Yi to be the king. Actually, other than disgusting Wen Yuan, Lu Man's intentions were very sinister. If they were to divorce, she could go after CEO Yi again. Or she could abort the child and claim that the test was wrong. Or they could stay together. Lu Man would insist that the child was CEO Yi's. If she gave birth to the child, it would be very disgusting. Wen Yuan covered her with a quilt. Don't talk anymore. Rest for a while. It's only been 2 days since the operation. I'm much better now, but I'm still very hungry and can't eat anything, Suemo muttered. Wen Yuan smiled. You'll be able to eat it in a few days. Just bear with it. All right, I only saw a nurse. Where's Kong Xiao? Hearing her question, Sumo's expression became a little uncomfortable. After a long time, she whispered, Why are you asking about him? Wen Yuan found it strange. I asked him to take care of you. Of course I have to ask if he's not here. Sumo looked at her. I asked him to go back. Wen Yuan, I don't want him to take care of me. What does that mean? Wen Yuan also saw that she didn't change her mind immediately. He couldn't force her. After all, she was a patient. Then tell me what you want to eat. I'll ask someone to make it and send it over in 2 days. Also, you really have to take care of your body. Chapter 4089. Suemo whispered, I know. Wen Yuan reached out and touched her face gently. It's good that you know. You're the one I'm most worried about. Suemo was always in her heart. She had never told her that she wasn't feeling well, and she knew that she couldn't take care of her all the time. However, things would be different if she had a family. Teacher Kong and Kong Xiao were good choices. This was Wen Yuan's evaluation after abandoning their relationship. At least Teacher Kong was an upright and easygoing person. Moreover, she liked Suemo very much. Suemo could reject Kong Xiao, but she couldn't reject Teacher Kong. Teacher Kong came to see her and take care of her. Although she politely rejected him, she couldn't rush him when he was here. Therefore, Teacher Kong was the one who stayed with her every night. This made Suemo very uneasy. Kong Xiao came over at 9 p.m. His old mother was chatting with Suemo by the bedside, looking tired. He pushed the door open and entered. Suemo glanced at him, then said in a low voice, Take Andy home. The nurse will be fine. Kong Xiao walked over and squatted down, talking to his mother gently. You were busy with classes in the afternoon. Why are you here at night? I'll stay here. Teacher Kong sighed. Suemo is used to me being here. It's inconvenient for a man like you to be here. After all, she's a girl. Hearing her words, Suemo couldn't say anything else. She could only coax her to go home first. It's good that Kong Xiao is here. Teacher Kong, you can go home first. I'm really fine. Dr. Chin's surgery is very good and I don't feel much pain. I can get up and I don't need to be taken care of. There are nurses here too. Teacher Kong looked at her. Then, will Kong Xiao stay here? I'll come back tomorrow afternoon. Suemo knew that it was a trap, but she couldn't do anything about it. She could only watch Kong Xiao and Teacher Kong leave with a bitter smile. The nurse watched from the side and smiled. Kong Xiao is chasing after you. He even used his old mother. He's quite sincere. Suemo lowered her eyes. He's sincere. How can I believe him? As long as Kong Xiao was in this circle, she really couldn't believe him. No, she wouldn't believe him even if he left this circle. Suemo was not naive. In this circle, he was someone who had been tempered by fire and became famous. If he said that he still had a true love, it would be a joke. If Kong Xiao had a true love, it would be Wen Yuan, and not Suemo, who he ridiculed as a mediocre person. To her surprise, Kong Xiao came back after 5 minutes. Suemo slowly lay down. Where's Mr. Kong? He sat by her bed and said shamelessly, I asked the driver to send her back. I don't need anyone here. You can go back. Suemo covered his face with a blanket and coldly said. She had made up her mind to ignore him. Kong Xiao did not force her and smiled. If you don't want me to be here, I'll call my mother over to accompany you. I think the car isn't far. After saying that, he looked as if he was about to make a call. Suemo was so angry that he slapped the phone away from his hand. How shameless can you be? The phone fell onto the blanket. Because she used so much force, her wound was affected, and the pain made her face pale. Kong Xiao couldn't be bothered with the phone anymore and propped himself up. Does it hurt? Let's see if the wound is opened up. As he said that, he pressed his hand on her shoulder and tore off a corner of the blanket, ignoring her objections, followed by the hospital gown. Chapter 4090. When his fingers touched her waist, he felt that it was very thin. She had lost a lot of weight. Coupled with the surgery and the fact that she couldn't eat for the past few days, she could only rely on a nutrient solution. He felt a little distressed and carefully lifted her clothes. Looking at the faint blood on the gauze, he looked up at her and said, "There's some blood. I'll ask the nurse to help you change the gauze." Suemo said no willfully, but how could he allow her to say no? He directly asked the nurse next to him to ask the doctor to come over, and Suemo whispered, "Didn't you say that I only need to change the gauze?" Kong Xiao put down the clothes and the quilt and said in a low and hoarse voice, "I'm not a doctor. My words don't count. Let the doctor take a look. Be good." Suemo looked at him and didn't say anything. She gently put her hand on the quilt. He said sorry and said that he hurt her. Suemo listened and felt a little uncomfortable. His words sounded a little inexplicable. The two nurses were whispering and looking over from time to time. The doctor soon came over. It was a male doctor. Kong Xiao frowned and asked, "Are there no female doctors?" The chief doctor, surnamed Wang, looked at Kong Xiao and said, "There's still male doctors in the obstetrics department." Suemo gently pursed her lips and said, "Chief Wang, don't worry about him." Chief Wang smiled and said, "Men are all controlled at home." He carefully lifted Suemo's hospital gown and looked at the wound. "It's not a big deal. I'll help you change the wound. After all, you can't move too much in the future." He was very dexterous and gentle. Although it was the abdomen, Suemo didn't feel anything wrong. Doctors didn't discriminate between men and women. Kong Xiao, on the other hand, was very concerned, but he turned this concern into bitterness and swallowed it. After dressing the wound, Chief Wang laughed again and said, "Little girl, you're not bad. I saw you on TV. Let's continue after you recover." Hearing his words, Suemo was a little embarrassed and forced a smile. Chief Wang made a gesture and said, "Okay, let's rest. Bear with it for a while, and you'll be able to eat some simple liquid food in 2 days." Suemo nodded and said, "Thank you, Chief Wang." Chief Wang smiled and went out. Before he left, he glanced at Kong Xiao's face. The chief doctor left, and the two nurses also went out. "Mr. Kong, call us if you need anything. We'll be outside." Kong Xiao nodded. When he closed the door and returned, Suemo was lying on the bed without making a sound. He laughed. "What's the matter?" Suemo looked at him for a long time before muttering in a low voice, "It's useless, Kong Xiao. It's impossible for us." "What do you mean impossible?" He sat beside her, his voice very gentle. "As long as you don't give up, it's possible." Seeing that she didn't look too good, he changed the topic. "Are you hungry?" Suemo ground his white teeth. "What do you think?" As soon as she finished speaking, Kong Xiao gave her a warm smile. "I'm hungry too." Suemo turned his head to the side and said, "If you're hungry, go eat. You'd better go home and not come here." There was no one in the ward, so he didn't need to pretend anymore. He leaned over and pressed his face against the side of her pillow. His voice was low and husky. "I'm not hungry." Sumo's face was a little hot, and she was a little annoyed. She wanted to turn around and vent her anger at him, but Kong Xiao gently pressed her waist and said in a hoarse voice, "Chief Wang said not to make any big movements, or it'll be bad if the wound reopens." Chapter 4091. She was still staring at him. Kong Xiao smiled and got closer to her ear. "It seems that we haven't done it for a long time. I'll feed you when you're better." Suemo really didn't expect that he could say these things to her in the hospital bed. She gritted her teeth. "Kong Xiao, if you want to find someone else, you don't lack a bed partner." His expression froze for a moment, as if he was injured. After a moment, he whispered, "There won't be anyone else in the future. I'm serious." She didn't know how to deal with it, but he got up and didn't pester her anymore. Kong Xiao came back from outside and didn't eat. He didn't have the mood to eat delicacies, so he directly ordered takeout. A person with a high status, like him, only ordered a simple meal and ate in the ward. Su Mo didn't want to talk to him, but she still licked her lower lip when she smelled the fragrance in the air. "Do you want to eat?" He smiled, "Bear with it." She turned her head away angrily. Kong Xiao packed his things and came over again. "I wanted to." He said to himself, "Let's have 2 children in the future, okay?" When he said this, Su Mo remembered how she looked when she took the morning after pill. The night was so cold, she sat on the road alone and drank about 10 bottles of beer, crying bitterly. And now, he said that he wanted to have 2 children with her. Su Mo looked down. "There are many people who want to have children with Mr. Kong." He smiled and reached out to touch her head gently. "You were polite to me when my mother was here, but now there is no one else. Just call me Kong Xiao." He got closer to her. "We have slept together, haven't we?" Su Mo stared at him. "There are so many women who have slept with you. Why don't you care about them?" This was a question that no man would answer, and Kong Xiao was not stupid. He didn't answer a question, but said, "Ruan Yin will no longer be my agent." Su Mo suddenly looked up. He smiled bitterly. "Su Mo, I just want to tell you that I really want to take care of you and cherish you, even if I lose you." Sumo's eyes had changed from shock to calmness. She looked at Kong Xiao and said lightly, "This is just your one-sided thinking, Kong Xiao. I miss someone." Pausing for a moment, his voice was slightly bitter. "Kong Xiao, you are used to this kind of life. Are you willing to do it?" He sighed. "Su Mo, you don't know how good you are." He didn't force her and just helped her adjust the blanket. "We've been talking for so long. Take a break. Call me if you need to go to the bathroom." His care was too domineering, and Su Mo didn't want to trouble Wen Yuan to take care of her, so she could only accept it. She thought that once she was discharged, they would have nothing to do with each other. Therefore, she stayed in the hospital's VIP ward peacefully. This small ward seemed to have become the sweetest place. Whenever Kong Xiao was free, she would come over. After 2 days, she was able to eat again. Teacher Kong began to give her all kinds of tonics, but Kong Xiao was always the one who delivered them. Their relationship was lukewarm and private, but in the eyes of the nurses, Su Mo was the person in Kong Xiao's heart. The reporters also smelled the scent of blood, and they began to pry for information. Ordinary people couldn't enter the VIP ward, but the reporters were very powerful. They already found out that Kong Xiao went to see Su Mo, the one who fought with Bai Jingxian last time. Chapter 4092. While Su Mo was in the hospital, rumors were already spreading outside. Kong Xiao didn't deny it and directly said that his girlfriend was sick. His girlfriend. It had been on the hot search list several times. Su Mo didn't use his phone, so he didn't know anything. It was no wonder that when Yuan looked at Su Mo strangely every time he came. However, she saw that Kong Xiao didn't want to say anything, so she didn't say anything. Su Mo stayed in the hospital for about 10 days and was going to be discharged the next day. That night, Qinshan happened to be on duty. Qinshan was still a very special existence in Shengyuan. He was the spiritual pillar of Shengyuan. The appearance of Shengyuan's nurses had been maintained at the top of the industry because of Dr. Qin. Qinshan carefully examined Su Mo and confirmed that there was no problem. "You could be discharged. You can go through the procedures tomorrow morning. I'll talk to the doctor on duty." Kong Xiao smiled. "Thank you." Qinshan stood up straight and smiled. "I still have to thank Mr. Kong for the surgery fee of 30 million. Not everyone is so generous." Su Mo looked at Kong Xiao. Kong Xiao didn't say anything and just sent Qinshan out. After closing the door, Su Mo leaned against the headboard and looked at him quietly. "The surgery fee is 30 million. He smiled faintly. "Yes, Dr. Qin is very expensive." He came over and touched her belly with his fingers. "There's no scar here. It's worth 30 million. At least in the eyes of a straight man, it was worth it. Although he didn't care much about her appearance, as a man, he always wanted his woman to be perfect. Su Mo paused. "I'll pay you back later." How? I remember that your money has been put into the home of love. It's not good to take it out now. His voice was hoarse. How about we continue our previous relationship, 30 million for half a year. When he spoke, he was very close to her. Suemo took the opportunity to slap his face. It wasn't too heavy, but the sound was quite loud. This slap made both of them sober. Kong Qiao wasn't angry, nor did he care if there were 5 finger marks on his face. He just smiled. I just want to take care of you. I don't mean anything else. Actually, she knew it, but she just couldn't help it. This kind of behavior was really not right. She was probably also arrogant because of the favor. Kong Qiao looked at her and let out a long breath. I'm going to smoke. Suemo looked at his back and slowly sat up, a bit dazed and confused. He said that he was serious and that he wanted to get married. Actually, at first, she was not moved at all. Perhaps it was because she was hurt too badly in the past. So, she was not moved no matter what he did or said. Only when she slapped him did he not seem to be angry at all. Sumo's heart throbbed strangely. However, this throbbing wasn't enough to support her to promise him anything. She wasn't a child anymore. She wouldn't trust anyone so easily. As for Kong Qiao, after finishing his cigarette, he pushed open the door and entered the room. He saw Suemo sitting at the head of the bed, lost in thought. He smiled and leaned against the door. You will consider me too? Suemo snapped out of her daze and raised her eyes to meet his playful gaze. She snappily said, Do you like being slapped by women? This habit isn't very good. I'm going to change it. He walked over and sat beside her again. I heard that you declined to live with Wenyuanqi. Chapter 4093. Kong Qiao smiled. Still living in the same place as before? She nodded. There's nothing bad about it. He agreed. There's nothing bad about it. There's still good memories. Suemo immediately recalled the memory of Car Z in the car downstairs of the apartment. She blushed and turned away. Please don't say that. What can I say? You don't want to hear it in the future, and you don't want to hear it in the past either. How about now? He said as he moved closer. Say that I want to kiss you. Her body froze, and then her chin was pinched by him. Although it was gentle, it was still forceful. Suemo bit her lips and stared at him. After a while, she said weakly, Let go of me. Kong Qiao's eyes flashed with fire, and his tight lines made his facial features look like they were carved. He was handsome and charming. He had always been good-looking. Otherwise, how could he have fooled so many women? Thinking of this, Suemo couldn't help feeling a little cold, as if a bucket of ice water had been poured from head to toe. He moved forward again and finally kissed her. He was very gentle and skillful. The hot breath from his nose seemed to have drilled into her limbs. She wanted to refuse, but she found that she had no strength in her body at all. She could only be kissed by him. Kong Qiao had only wanted to kiss her lightly, but he was an adult man after all, and this kiss was the first kiss he wanted to give her after they were together, so it was especially touching. Plus, she was obedient in his arms. For a moment, he lost control. Following her strength, he pressed her into the soft bed and continued to kiss her. When she tried to resist, he held her hand and intertwined his fingers so tightly that it was as if he was nailing her to the bed. But no matter how passionate he was, he still kept some gentleness and didn't touch her wound. After a kiss, he was not satisfied and wanted more. His thin lips moved to her ear, and he murmured, Move to my place, okay? Suemo didn't say anything. He bit her earlobe discontentedly. I'm moving to a new place. It's clean, and there won't be anyone else in the future. Suemo was still nailed to the bed by him. She couldn't move, but her heart was moving up and down violently. Her face was flushed, and she looked much rosier than usual. Kong Qiao was a little impulsive, and his voice became hoarse. I'll pick you up from the hospital tomorrow, okay? Suemo bit his lip. Kong Qiao, what are we? She knew he wanted her. His body expressed it very clearly, and he was not afraid of her knowing. Kong Qiao pecked the corner of her lips. Boyfriend and girlfriend, are you satisfied with this answer? Suemo shook his head and broke free from Kong Qiao's grip. He gently stroked Kong Qiao's forehead and said in a low voice, Kong Qiao, you might just be impulsive. Don't make promises so easily. A lifetime is long, and if you're just acting on a whim, you might regret it very soon. Really, promises are the most fragile thing. You can spend 30 million today, but tomorrow, you might not even be willing to look at me. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his face. His voice was hoarse as he said, Suemo, we can wait and see. Suemo didn't say anything else. She just remained silent. Then Kong Xiao kissed her again, pressed her down on the bed, and kissed her gently, with 120% love and cherishing, kissed her. She did not refuse, but he did not know what she meant. But he could not stop, and he enjoyed her submissiveness. End of this chapter. Chapter 4094. Suemo had never experienced such a tender moment before. He was curious and moved. He kissed her again and again until his body was on fire. Then he suddenly got up, his handsome face full of depression, and finally went to the bathroom. Suemo heard the sound of water and thought that he must be taking a shower. She bit her lips and leaned against the headboard quietly. Her heart was in a mess. When Kong Xiao came out, he had regained his composure. Usually, he slept on the small bed, but today was different. He lay down beside her. Suemo was stunned and speechless. Kong Xiao, get down. He lay beside her and pulled her into his arms, glaring at her. If you call me again, not only will I not get down, I'll go in. You're so shameless. She glared at him with her face flushed red. Seeing that he had angered her, he softened his voice. All right, I'm just lying down for a while. I'm not doing anything. He wanted her, but this was a hospital and it was inconvenient. And Sumo's body wasn't fully recovered either. Suemo ignored him and ignored him. Kong Xiao hugged her from behind and buried his face in the side of her neck. It was so hot that she couldn't ignore it. Suemo endured it. After all, she would get rid of him after she was discharged. Asterisk Qinshin came out of the hospital and went straight to Chiu Garden, where Qin Anlin and Yulianqiu were staying. Surprisingly, the couple who didn't get along were there too. It was Qin Mo and He Huan. Qinshin got off the car and closed the door with a smile on his face. She remembered that He Huan was only staying in City B for a few days. It had been 10 days and she hadn't left yet. Did she get back together with Qin Mo? He Huan and Qin He Huan were playing on the swing. He Huan was petite and small, but she was dressed very casually. She wore a white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Her skin was a healthy wheat color because she had been abroad for many years, and her hair was thin and short. Qinshin lowered his eyes and noticed that she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. So he understood in his heart that these extra few days were probably a ploy by Qin Moyu after he wasn't satisfied. Hi, sister-in-law. Qinshan went over and greeted her handsomely. He Huan turned around. Qinshan. Qin He Huan called out cheerfully, Uncle Chun. He Huan said helplessly, It's Aunt. Qinshan picked He Huan up, lifted her up, and kissed her again. Our He Huan can call me whatever she wants. He Huan only smiled at her broken worldview and played with her fingers. She had a good relationship with the other members of the Qin family. Except for Qin Mo, Qinshan didn't know what was wrong with this couple. In any case, they hadn't been harmonious ever since they got married. Looking at her second brother, he should be like her eldest brother. He looked refined on the outside, but in fact, he was the type that lived well in Q University. Her eldest sister-in-law shouldn't be unhappy with him. Why did they have to travel all over the world? Their married life was like the cowherd and weaver girl, year after year. After coaxing He Huan, Qinshan placed her on the swing and let her play. He lowered his voice and asked, How long do you plan to stay this time? She looked at He Huan and knew that the little fella was listening attentively. Hence, she lowered her voice even more. He Huan is growing up. You guys can't always live apart. He Huan seemed a little distracted. After a while, she said softly, I've mentioned a divorce before, but Chinamo isn't willing. I don't know why he insists on such a marriage. It doesn't make much sense. The moment she said that, she seemed to have sensed something and turned around. Chinamo was standing behind them. Chapter 4095. Qinshan also saw it and coughed lightly. You guys talk. I'll take He Huan to eat something. With that said, he picked up little He Huan and walked towards the big house. Qin Yihuan turned her head and widened her eyes. When she turned back, she whispered, "Andy, will Dad and Mom really divorce? Who will I follow?" Qin Shin tugged at her pigtails and said absent-mindedly, "Did you hear that? And you call me Andy?" Little Yihuan would only be called correctly when he needed help. Qin Shun felt a little bitter. The couple had been at odds for several years, and the most pitiful one was Yihuan. She was often left in the big house, not loved by her father and mother. In the garden, Yihuan looked at Chinamo for a few seconds, then sat on the swing and swayed gently. Chinamo had just returned from the company and was still in his formal wear. He walked in front of her and did not allow her to escape. His voice was so deep that it was about to drip water. "So, this is the reason why you stayed for a few more days." Yihuan was still very happy, but she did not know that you were still thinking about not wanting her. "I didn't abandon her." Yihuan glanced at him. Chinamo went forward. "Then you want custody?" "Yihuan, don't even think about it." He was a little annoyed, so he took off his coat and threw it on the bench. He sat down with his long legs and stared at her in the thin dusk. They actually had a good time. It was good when they got married, but then there was a misunderstanding, and Yihuan frequently went abroad and rarely came back. If it wasn't for Yihuan's birth, she probably wouldn't have returned to China at all. She didn't speak, and Qin Mo's gaze was a little ugly. "Why, you're not talking? Feeling guilty?" "Why would I feel guilty?" Yihuan's face was a little pale. "Chinamo, do you think it's interesting for us to go on like this? An unhappy family is not good for Yihuan. Why don't we?" Before she could finish, he stood up and walked in front of her. He leaned forward and said, "Yihuan, you're not doing this for Yihuan. You're doing this for yourself. Because he's still alive, you regret marrying me, don't you? You still think about him and want to go back to that man. Let me tell you, I'll never divorce you in this life. Just give up." Yihuan stared into his eyes. There was only anger and a trace of hatred in his eyes. She smiled. "Chinamo, you can be angry too? I thought you weren't." She smiled bitterly. The next second, he grabbed her chin and stared into her eyes. "Don't think that I don't know that he's also in the country. That's why you stay in the country and don't go anywhere. You go to the library to see him, but he might not remember who you are. Yihuan, do you dare to tell him that you're married? Do you dare to tell him that you have to lie under me every day and be fucked by me all night? Do you think that you can be with him just because you're divorced?" His eyes were filled with coldness. "There's no such thing in this life. Either you fulfill my wish, or you destroy me. Fulfill or destroy." Yihuan lowered her gaze, her voice so low that it sounded like she was sighing. "Chinamo, do you know anything about my past? How much do you know? Actually, you don't know anything." He didn't hear it clearly, and she didn't want to say too much. She jumped off the swing and wanted to walk into the mansion. However, Qin Mo grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 4096. Yihuan sat in his arms and said coldly, "Chinamo, what on earth do you want?" He pinched her chin with his long and cold fingers and glanced at her face. "Stay here and don't mention divorce again." Yihuan looked down. "Chinamo, do you think this kind of marriage is interesting?" He pinched her chin and forced her to look up. He narrowed his eyes and said in a low and husky voice, "I think it's very interesting, especially when I tie you to the bed, Mrs. Qin." Yihuan slapped him in the face without thinking. It was a loud sound in the dark. Qin Mo's eyes were filled with anger. He put more force into his fingers and easily left a bruise on her white chin. She was in pain, but she didn't make a sound. He sneered, "You're really numb to me, aren't you? You don't even scream in pain, huh?" He was so jealous that he couldn't care less. He pulled her to the main house and went upstairs, passing the people in the living room. Yihuan didn't want to, so he dragged her. Qin Shun was shocked. "Qin Mo, stay out of it. This is between me and your sister-in-law." Qin Mo's voice was so cold that it almost froze everyone. Qin Amlin and Yu Liangxiu were also stunned. "Qin Mo, you're crazy. Yihuan is your wife, not another woman." But Qin Mo didn't seem to hear it. He pulled Yihuan and said coldly, "Dad, Mom, we have something to talk about." Qin Amlin said coldly, "You're making trouble." But no matter how he tried to stop him, Qin Mo still took He Huan to his bedroom. The door slammed with a loud bang. Chen lowered his head. He Huan was stunned. Is Dad going to hit Mom? The adults didn't know how to answer, and it was not good for parents to intervene when their son was obviously going to have a rough married life. At this time, Yimeyun came back with Tang Xiaoxue. Seeing the scene, he smiled and said, "What's wrong?" Qin Anlin looked at his eldest son and sighed. He sat down and said, "It's all because of Qin Mo. My wife finally came back, but she didn't have a good meal." Yimeyun was almost 40 years old, the most mature and charming age for a man. He took off his coat and sat down. "Dad, you know that He Huan rarely comes back, and Qin Mo probably has been hungry for a long time. They're all men, so they can understand." Qin Anlin looked at his eldest son and cursed in his heart. "Muyun, he's using violence to coerce his wife. That's also the fun between husband and wife." Yi Muyun dismissed his father with a few words. Who hasn't been young before? He gently brought up the shameful things his father did when he was young. For a moment, Qin Anlin touched his nose and didn't know what to say. He even stole a glance at his wife. Fortunately, Liangqiu didn't say anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to keep his old face. Qin Anlin sighed in his heart. Of the 5 children, other than the one who couldn't be exposed, Qin Mu was the only one who was slightly more normal. There was no need to talk about Qin Shun. He was so handsome that he could go abroad. Every day, there would be a group of women shouting that they wanted to give birth to monkeys for Dr. Qin. Mu Yin and Qin Mo were the same kind of weird people. Qin Mo had learned his big brother's tricks completely. Qin Anlin didn't think about it all. Dragons gave birth to dragons, and phoenixes gave birth to phoenixes. They were all his excellent genes, and the only girl who had mutated was probably Qin Mu. End of this chapter. Chapter 4097. At this moment, Yi Miyun explained the atrocities upstairs in a few words. The group of people were eating downstairs. He Huan's screams could be heard from upstairs from time to time. It was just as they finished eating. However, Yi Liangqiu was still frightened and looked at his eldest son from time to time. Was this really a love interest? "Mom, let's eat." Mr. Yi smiled and then said to his little girl, "Cher, give Mom a piece of her favorite." Tang Cher replied with an "Oh." In fact, she was only 2 years younger than him, but she was still as obedient as if she was 18 years old. She obediently took a full bowl of food for Yi Liangqiu, ensuring that her mother-in-law would not be able to speak again during the meal. Yi Liangqiu looked at her son helplessly and amused. Only Cher would be trained like a little pet by him. However, this was also good. At least, her eldest son should not be as interesting as Qin Mo. Upstairs, He Huan was really tortured badly. Her hands were tied with a tie by Qin Mo, and she was tortured by him. She screamed and cried that it was painful. He pinched her chin and kissed her fiercely. His voice was even more unbelievably low. "Do you also feel pain?" "You can't feel pain. Your heart can only beat for him." "He Huan, I'm just a photo to you, right? In fact, I'm nothing. I'm nothing even though I've made you like this." He was in a mess, and he didn't even know what he was talking about. He only knew how to possess her. She was his wife, his woman. He had liked her for so long, and she had a heart of stone. When He Huan was about to be unable to bear the pain, she lay on the pillow softly and cried, "Qin Mo, let me go." His eyes were as deep as ink. He looked at her quietly and stopped all the plundering. He blinked his dark eyes and asked in a low voice, "Let go of your body or your life, He Huan." She laid there, her tears dripping onto the pillow. She thought that even if she said she loved him, he wouldn't believe her. Moreover, she didn't want to say it. She just whispered, "You know." Qin Mo chuckled. "Really? Then I want to see how you can leave me without my consent and how that person can survive." He Huan's face was pale. She almost lost her voice. "Qin Mo, you can't." "Why can't I?" He hooked her chin. "Why can't I deal with a man who seduced my wife?" He didn't. He Huan closed her eyes. Her long eyelashes were wet with tears. Her face was as pale as a sheet. Qin Mo looked at her, and his voice suddenly became tired. "He Huan, is it hard to stay with me?" Qin Mo looked at her, and his voice suddenly became tired. "He Huan, is it hard to stay by my side?" He thought that she had understood their feelings for each other for so many years. But later, he found out that she used him as a photo, because the person she liked couldn't smile at her or talk to her anymore. He thought about divorce, and it was ridiculous. But as the years passed, he couldn't bear to give up. He looked at her, his wife. Suddenly, he felt a lot of pain. She was lying in a mess, and there were traces of him ravaging her body. Chin-mo reached out to cover his eyes. He suddenly took a coat and threw it on her. Go take a shower. I'll take you back later. Jiutian Shenwang. Chapter 4098. Yihuan didn't move because it was painful. Chin-mo stood by the window alone and smoked 2 cigarettes. He turned around and saw that she was still lying there with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was asleep or not. He just leaned there and watched quietly, feeling a stabbing pain in his heart. He didn't want to hurt her, but he had never been in her heart. She could even give up on Yihuan. How much she couldn't stand this marriage that she didn't even want Yihuan. Yihuan. Chin-mo felt bitter. When she gave birth to Yihuan, he had been so happy to have such a name. Chin-mo cared about Yihuan. However, she might have never thought about it and didn't care. All she wanted was freedom. He could endure it when she was abroad, and he could wait for her to change her mind. However, she was asking for a divorce now, because that man had woken up. Chin-mo felt a sharp pain in his heart. He sat by the bed and gently caressed her face. Yihuan woke up instinctively. He looked down at her and asked in a low voice, "Does it still hurt?" Her fair arms were bruised, accusing him of his brutality. Yihuan buried her face in the pillow and didn't want to talk to him. Chin-mo sighed and said, "I'll wash it." "Chin-mo," she finally said, "I'm not willing to accept a date every time we fight." She sat up slowly and put his coat aside. "We're in the past. Chin-mo, it's a problem between us. It has nothing to do with anyone else." He stood there, and when he heard this, he smiled coldly. "Whether it's related or not, I've already stepped in." He bent down and looked at Yihuan. "I won't cause trouble for him as long as you don't divorce me. You know how to make me happy and how to make me unhappy, huh?" Yihuan glared at him. "Chin-mo is despicable. It's not like you've known me for the first time." His fingers slowly stroked her chin. There was a faint bruise on Yihuan's chin, which was caused by him. His tone was also slow. "Aren't you despicable? Don't you know what kind of feelings you had, and what kind of motive you had to climb into my bed and marry me? Since you've provoked me, don't think of giving up halfway." Yihuan slapped his hand away with disgust in his eyes. "Chin-mo, don't be so infatuated. Don't you know very well what you've done?" Chin-mo clenched his fists. "Those women were just playing around. I never really touched them." "Is that so?" Yihuan smiled faintly, with a hint of mockery and bitterness. She didn't even want to admit that she liked him. She just wanted him to think that she had never loved him. At least when facing him like this, she wouldn't feel so embarrassed. After saying that, she wanted to go to the bathroom. However, her arm was caught by Chin-mo. He frowned and stared at her. "Speak clearly." Yihuan looked down. "I can't. Between us, there's no need to speak clearly. If President Qin is unhappy, he can use violence, right?" His breath hurt as he stared at her. Yihuan smiled faintly. She endured the pain and got off the bed to go to the bathroom. Just as she turned on the water, Chin-mo came in and said faintly, "Let's shower together." She wanted to reject him. However, he pushed her against the wall and touched her face with his slender fingers. "Did I hurt you just now?" Chapter 4099. Yihuan turned her face away. She did not want to talk to him. Chin-mo turned her body around and looked at her carefully. He said expressionlessly, "Let's do it again." Yihuan was stunned for a moment. Then, she could not help but say, "How shameless can you be? We are husband and wife. If you don't do it with me, who will you do it with?" After saying that, he kissed her and pressed her against the wall. The bathroom wall was a little warm because of the hot water. It was not cold even when she was pressed against it. However, Yihuan felt cold all over her body. It was probably a high fever, she thought to herself, but she did not care if she was sick. Anyway, he would not let her go if she was sick. He would rather torture her even more miserably before sending her to the hospital. Yihuan did not say a word. Let him do it. Anyway, he would let her go when he was satisfied. Her head became heavier and heavier, and her body slowly became soft. Don't faint. He found her lips and kissed them. He kissed her forcefully. However, Huan still could not help it. She fell into his arms. Fortunately, there was a doctor at home. Qin Mo went down in embarrassment. He called Qin Shun to go up and check on Huan. Qin Shun was stunned. Everyone below was stunned. Yi Liangxiu was the first to go up. Then, Qin Shun and Qin Mo went up. Qin Anlin looked at his most outstanding eldest son and said with a cold face, "You fainted. What kind of fun is this?" Yi Miyun stood up and said, "We have to ask Qin Mo if he did not control it well." He picked up Tang's share and said, "Okay, let's go home." His little heart was a little worried about Huan. "We don't want to wait." Yi Miyun looked up and said, "It's just that Qin Mo is too rough. It will not be a big problem." Tang Shui nodded and followed him obediently. As soon as the couple left, Qin Anlin sighed in his heart. His eldest son was really born into a different family. When he was young, he went to the Tang family and wanted to be half a son to Tang Yu. He was only 12 years old, but he already knew how to chase his wife. Now, it seemed that his wife was as obedient as a little girl. Qin Anlin sighed and looked upstairs. His second son, on the other hand, was doing well in his career. He was also a famous figure in City B, but his weakness was Huan. Since it was not convenient for Qin Anlin to go up, he took care of Huan. Huan's eyes widened, and she asked worriedly, "What's wrong with Mom?" "I'm not feeling well." Qin Anlin comforted the little fellow, "But I should be fine soon." Qin Huan bit her lips and asked softly, "Did Daddy hit Mommy?" "Oh," Huan said, "then it must be very painful." "Oh," little E said happily, "then it must be very painful." "Yes," Qin Anlin said. While they were talking, Qin Shan checked Huan upstairs. Huan was wearing a bathrobe, and Qin Mo must have helped her put it on. Yi Liangxiu stood aside, feeling a little worried. She looked at her son with a blaming look. Qin Mo didn't have much expression on his face, but his eyes were anxious. Qin Shin straightened up. "It's not a big problem. She just caught a cold and exhausted. She will be fine after some rest and medicine." Then she looked at her brother. "Don't be so rough in the future. Huan is not even 160. As for Qin Mo, he was 184. Thinking about it, she felt sorry for her sister-in-law. Qin Mo was so strong when he was crazy. Qin Shin thought for a moment. "Don't wake her up if she is asleep. I'll give her a shot to reduce her fever. Also, control yourself for the next 2 days. If you treat her well, she won't go abroad again." In a chapter, hurry up and read the latest update. Chapter 4100. Qin Mo stood there quietly. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "I want to treat her better, but she doesn't need it." Qin Shin quickly inserted the needles, and Yi Liangxiu went over to take care of him. The siblings walked out together and went to the study. Qin Shin couldn't help but say, "If you love her, why can't you use the normal way? Your marriage will affect Huan." "The normal way?" Qin Mo walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and said, "Are you going to persuade me to divorce her?" Qin Shin paused for a moment and said, "No." She walked over and stood beside Qin Mo and whispered, "I know you love Huan very much, but brother, you should give her some time to breathe. Haven't I given her enough?" Qin Mo's voice was hoarse. "Qin Shun, I often feel powerless. Sometimes I want to let go, but in the end, I can't do it. I don't want to, but more than that, I don't want to let go. I know that if I let go, she will really fly away and never come back. Now, there is still Huan. She will come back once or twice a year, and we are still husband and wife." "You blame her, and you hate her." Qin Shun let out a long breath and said, "Brother, have you ever thought that Huan must have liked you before? Otherwise, she wouldn't have given birth to Huan. If it was just for your face, you know how unique she is." Qin Mo tilted his head and stared at Qin Shun. After a long time, he smiled bitterly and didn't say anything. He stood there and smoked. He was thinking, did Huan really love him? If she loved him, why couldn't she wait to leave him after that person woke up? Why could she be so cruel after so many years? Qin Mo quietly smoked 2 cigarettes and looked at Qin Shun. It's fine here. You can go back. By the way, how is Su Mo? Chin Chin chuckled. Were you concerned about her, or were you concerned about your money tree? Chin Mo rolled his eyes. Is there a difference? She'll be discharged tomorrow. Kong Xiao is much gentler to her than you are to He Huan. Brother, women need to be coaxed. Don't always use your authority as President Qin to pressure her. He Huan won't fall for it. Besides, it'll be hard for you to explain it to Uncle He. Qin Shun patted his second brother's shoulder. I'll go back first. He Huan is fine. Qin Mo nodded slightly. Qin Shun said goodbye to his parents and drove back. Qin Mo returned to his bedroom and was scolded by his mother in a low voice. If you bully her like this here, I don't know what will happen when you go to your home. He Huan will be staying here these days. As for you, before Yi Liangxiu finished, Qin Mo interrupted, of course I'll be staying here too. Yi Liangxiu looked at her son. She disagreed, but there was nothing she could do. After giving him a final warning, she went downstairs to take Yi Huan. Qin Mo sat alone and quietly looked at Yi Huan on the bed. Yi Huan's little face was a little pale. He reached out and touched it. It was still a little hot. Qin Mo lay beside her and didn't dare to sleep. He quietly watched over her and then carefully wiped her with warm water. He was indeed not gentle. Her delicate body was covered with the bruises he left. His face was slightly red as he looked at her. As he wiped her, He Huan suddenly woke up. Her black eyes opened to a slit as she looked at him silently. They had quarreled and quarreled before, but at this moment they stared at each other and seemed especially calm, as if those quarrels had never happened. End of chapter. Hurry up and read the latest update. Chapter 4101. Qin Mo spoke first. Are you hungry? I'll go downstairs and get something to eat. He Huan pursed her lips and nodded after about half a minute. Because of this nod, Qin Mo's heart seemed to be hit by something. He pressed his palm on the blanket and smiled. Good girl. It was a very touching moment. His expression was also very gentle, completely different from the fierce look he had on her in the bathroom. He Huan looked at him as if she didn't know him. Qin Mo put his finger on her head. It's okay, it's not too hot. I'll go get the food. He Huan's lips moved, but she didn't say anything in the end. Qin Mo went downstairs and Qin Anlin went to coax Yi Huan. Yi Liangxiu was there and saw her son coming down. Yi Huan is awake. I'll go get something to eat. Qin Mo nodded and followed Yi Liangxiu into the kitchen. Yi Liangxiu specially made 2 new dishes while talking to her son. What do you and Yi Huan plan to do? Is she still going overseas? No. Qin Mo's voice was a little low. She'll stay in the country for now. She formed a studio and will probably develop in the country for a long time. Yi Huan was very famous in the American film industry and was considered a first-class director. From Qin Mo's point of view, it would be a pity for her to give up the overseas market. Of course, he wouldn't ask her to go overseas. He wanted her to stay, but he was afraid that she would stay for someone else. Yi Liangxiu put the dishes on the plate and passed it to him. Communicate well. Yi Huan is going to school soon. Do you want her to watch you fight? How is it noisy? Qin Mo said calmly. I'm going up. You should sleep early too, Mom. Yi Liangxiu nodded. Okay, you too. Qin Mo looked at his mother and took the plate upstairs. He pushed open the bedroom door. Yi Huan seemed to have fallen asleep again. He walked in quietly and put the tray aside. His voice was a little hoarse. Yi Huan, get up and eat. She had just mentioned food, but now she buried her face in the pillow. I'm not hungry. He stared at her helplessly and bitterly. There was clearly a gap between them, but he couldn't help but treat her well. His voice was a little hoarse. All right, I'm up. As he spoke, he pulled her out of the quilt and put her against his side. Shall I feed you? Yi Huan woke up immediately. She opened her eyes and said in a low voice, I'll eat it myself. You can put it in the living room. Qin Mo stared at her for a while and finally agreed. He let go of her and brought it over. Yi Huan put on a coat and got out of bed. She was still a little dizzy, so she sat down and exhaled. Still uncomfortable, he sat beside her and put his hand on her forehead. Yi Huan was not used to this kind of intimacy, so she gently broke away. A little, it doesn't matter. She probably didn't have the strength to quarrel with him because she was sick. Qin Mo's eyes flickered slightly, but he didn't say anything. He just put the rice in front of her. Mom made it for you. See if it's to your taste. Ihuan choked for a moment. The reason why she didn't end up with Qin and Mo was not only because of Ihuan, but also because Qin Mo's parents treated her very well. They were really good to her. She ate quietly, and Qin and Mo watched her. After she finished eating, he carried her to the bed to rest. He cleaned up the dishes and ate a little. When he returned to the bedroom, Ihuan had already fallen asleep. He stood by the bed and felt a little lonely, even as she was by his side. Chapter 4102. After a long time, Qin and Mo finally left and went to the bathroom to take a shower. Actually, he wasn't satisfied yet, but he couldn't do it tonight or for the next few days. When he lifted the blanket and laid beside her, Ihuan seemed to have woken up for a while. She instinctively wanted to move back, but he held her waist and said in a low voice, "Don't move, I won't touch you." As he said that, he felt a little bitter. He lay flat and whispered, "When you're better, you can go anywhere you want. Just two things: you're not allowed to see him," and he lowered his voice even more. "And remember to go home." Ihuan's body was against him, lying quietly beside him. He didn't know if she heard him, but he knew that she heard him. She stayed by his side and pretended not to hear him. She had always pretended not to know that he loved her. He suddenly turned around and pulled her slender body into his arms, hugging her tightly. Ihuan said hoarsely, "You said you won't touch me." Qin and Mo buried his face in her neck, and his lips touched her delicate skin. Ihuan ran around all day and didn't take care of herself, so he didn't know why her skin was still so delicate. She was very beautiful, but her body was thin. Her skin was fair. He felt that he couldn't take it anymore and said in a low voice, "Ihuan, I'm your husband." Hugging is a common thing between husband and wife. Let's go to sleep. Ihuan felt uncomfortable with his entire body buried in her neck. She was very hot, so she struggled. "I want to drink some water." Qin and Mo moved. "I'll get up and pour it for you." He supported himself with one arm and went to the living room to get a cup of warm water for her. When he came back, he sat at the head of the bed and helped her up, wanting to feed her. Ihuan refused. "I'll drink it myself." But Qin and Mo insisted, so she leaned on his shoulder. As long as she looked up, she could see his beautiful chin and deep facial features. Qin and Mo was a very good-looking man with a cold and masculine temperament. He was different from that person. Why did she feel that they were similar? As she thought about it, she took small sips. After drinking, Qin Mo's voice was a little hoarse. "Lie down and take a nap." He put the glass aside and flipped her over, his hand touching her from behind. "What are you doing?" Ihuan was a little scared. She gasped and reached out to grab him. Qin and Mo stared at her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm just checking if you're sweating." As he spoke, he put down her clothes and helped her to straighten her body. Seeing her close her eyes and sleep, he was not sleepy at all. He wanted to smoke, but when he saw her sleeping face, he could not bear to leave. Just like that, the night passed. Ihuan woke up at dawn, drenched in sweat. His body also felt relaxed, as if he had been reborn. Qin and Mo was still asleep. She took the opportunity to look at him carefully. Looking at his furrowed brows in his sleep, she thought that he must be unhappy with a wife who ran around outside all day long. Ihuan smiled gently, but it was a bitter smile. After that incident, she really could not lie in the same bed with him every night and pretend to be a loving couple. Seeing him once or twice a year was already too much for her. If he said that she liked someone else, then so be it. Ihuan sighed and wanted to take a shower and change her clothes. But as soon as she moved, he pressed her down on the bed. She looked up and saw Qin Mo's dark, ink-stained eyes. "This time, were you going without saying goodbye again?" He stared at her, and his voice was tense. Especially when his Adam's apple moved slightly, it was full of dangerous masculinity. Chapter 4103. Ihuan turned her face away. "I'm going to take a shower." He stared at her as if he was making sure that she wasn't lying. After about 10 seconds, he let go of her, turned to the side, and got up. As he got dressed, he said, "There's a meeting this morning. You stay at home and rest. I'll come to pick up your Ihuan in the afternoon." Ihuan sat on the bed. Her lips moved, but she didn't say anything in the end. Chin Mo tied his tie and looked at her. Didn't you say that we're staying? If we stay, we'll naturally live together. We'll take Ihuan home ourselves. Ihuan straightened her body a little. Chin Mo's voice was a little hoarse. If you think our relationship isn't strong enough, we can have another child. Ihuan shook her head. I don't want to have a child. He walked over, leaned over, and gently touched her lips. Then be obedient. You can do whatever you want, but don't do anything that will make me unhappy. Ihuan looked down. Do you have to be so bossy? He paused for a moment. Unless you don't want to see Ihuan again. As he said that, he straightened his body and walked towards the door without any hesitation. Ihuan was so angry that she threw a pillow at him, but it hit the back of his waist. The pillow fell to the ground. He turned back and stared at her for a while, but he still picked up the pillow and put it back gently. Ihuan glared at him. Chin Mo didn't want to do anything at first, but looking at her, he couldn't help holding her shoulders and kissing her. She was shocked and punched him. However, her punches brought out his ferocious nature. He pressed her onto the bed and kissed her passionately. When she refused, he tore off her pajamas and bit her shoulder forcefully. Ihuan let out a low gasp as if he was about to breathe. Chin Mo bit her so hard that it almost bled. After a long time, he buried his face in her shoulder and said in a low voice, "Heartless little thing." Ihuan's heart was touched. He held up his handsome face again and stared at her. Ihuan bit her lips and didn't say anything. She didn't care about the bite marks on her body either. Chin Mo, on the other hand, helped her adjust her clothes and smiled. Next time, I'll bite you like this. If you don't behave, I'll torture you. Let's see if you'll behave or not. As he spoke, he got up and looked at her again before he left. Ihuan was unwilling to look him in the eye, so she turned her face away. Chin Mo's eyes darkened. He left without saying anything. The meeting this morning was really important. When he went downstairs, he bumped into his mother and smiled. "Morning, Mom." Iliancio looked upstairs. "How's Ihuan?" "It's pretty good. They don't have a fever anymore. I'll pick them up tonight." Chin Mo drank a mouthful of milk and said lightly. Since her son had said so, his mother couldn't say anything else. She only told him to give in to Ihuan. Since he cared about her, why didn't he treat her better? Chin Mo was stunned for a moment. He smiled and didn't say anything. When he went to the company, the secretary had already put the meeting materials in front of him. He flipped through them. Did Kong Xiao come to the company today? The secretary smiled. I heard from his assistant that he won't come until tomorrow. He has something important to do today. Chin Mo snorted. Suemo was discharged. He shook his head. He's obsessed and doesn't care about his future anymore. The secretary was his confidant. Ruan Yun picked an artist from the company's trainees. It seems that she wants to train him again. President Chin, do you want to ask her? Let's talk about it after he becomes famous. Chin Mo said lightly. He didn't care too much about Ruan Yun. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 4104. In the hospital, Suemo was sitting on the bed. Today was the day she would be discharged. Kong Xiao had gone to handle the discharge procedures, so she was sitting alone, feeling a little bored and speechless. He was busy as if her affairs were his, but she didn't need him to do that. At this time, when Yuan came over with a bouquet of flowers in his hand, Suemo looked at her and said, "What flowers did you buy?" "Roses." When Yuan put the flowers in her hand and smiled. "I didn't buy them. Kong Xiao bought them." With that, he put the flowers in her hand. When Yuan was stunned. He looked at the flowers in his hand and couldn't come back to himself for a long time. Kong Xiao stood at the door and smiled. "Let's go home." Suemo raised her eyes and looked at him quietly. There was a hint of loss in her eyes. He walked over with a smile and picked up the luggage. "Okay, let's go back." When Yuan drove here, Suemo wanted to take his car, but Kong Xiao took her into his car after putting the luggage away. Suemo was stunned for a moment, but she still got in. Kong Xiao drove a Bentley Mulsanne. When the car drove out, there were even a few fans standing at the entrance of the hospital asking for Kong Xiao's autograph. He stopped the car and rolled down the window to sign for them. Of course, a few fans also saw Suemo and whispered, "Kong Xiao, is this your girlfriend?" Kong Xiao signed the autograph and handed it over with a smile. Yes, she's my girlfriend. Wow, can we take a photo together? The fans took the opportunity to ask. Su Mo wanted to refuse, but Kong Xiao had already unfastened her seatbelt and took her to take a photo with the fans. It wasn't until the fans left that she glared at him. How can you do this? If they post it, who said that I can't find a girlfriend or get married? Su Mo, it's 2019 now. He smiled nonchalantly and helped her buckle her seatbelt. His actions were very intimate. Su Mo turned her head and ignored him. Do you like the flowers? He continued to drive. Although pink roses don't match your age, I think pink roses are better for the first time. Girls will like them. Su Mo wanted to throw the flowers away, but the car window was opened, so she closed it in embarrassment. A faint smile appeared on Kong Xiao's face. It was a joyful expression. Kong Xiao, when I get home, you leave. In the future, don't come here. She pursed her pale lips and said softly. Kong Xiao's fingers tapped on the steering wheel. Are you that cruel? Su Mo bit his lip. We are nothing. Then, if you give me a status, or if I give you a status, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Cohabitation shouldn't be a problem, he said softly. She didn't say anything. Anyway, she would go back to work after she recuperated, and they wouldn't be able to see each other. However, Su Mo didn't expect that when she went back to her apartment, Mr. Kong was busy cooking. Kong Xiao carried her luggage and closed the door with one hand, while Su Mo just stood there. Teacher Kong came over and said warmly, You're back. Kong Xiao quickly takes Su Mo to rest. Teacher Kong, why are you here? She actually wanted to ask him how he had the key to her house, but if she couldn't ask such a question from an elder who cared so much about her, she would be too ignorant. How could Teacher Kong not know? He pretended to be ignorant and smiled. Kong Xiao said that you're going to be discharged. He said that your body is weak and needs nourishment. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 4105. Teacher Kong continued, I was thinking that it's not hygienic to cook outside, and it's too tiring for you to cook yourself. So, I decided not to come over. Su Mo, don't be jealous of Auntie's cooking. Teacher Kong automatically categorized herself as an auntie. She was happy that her son was finally willing to get married. Whether or not they wanted to have children was another matter. It was up to them. Teacher Kong said that it was better to spend a few years with the two of them. How could life be wasted on having children? How could Su Mo say no to Teacher Kang's words? She smiled and went to the sofa to rest. Wen Yuan came over too. After greeting Teacher Kong, he helped Su Mo tidy up the room and found an excuse to leave. Su Mo didn't even have time to scream. She was like a small fish on a plate, being fried by Kong Xiao anxiously. Watch some TV and lie down after eating. I'll peel an apple for you. Kong Xiao bent down, his voice gentle as though he was spitting into her ear. Su Mo looked up. He smiled and walked to the kitchen. Teacher Kong heard it and took out a big red apple to wash. Kong Xiao took it over and washed it. As a mother, she said, I'm thick-skinned enough to help you chase after your wife. Don't let me down. Kong Xiao smiled. I'll sleep here tonight and give birth to a big grandson. Teacher Kong spat. Su Mo has just recovered. You beast. Can't you wait? This was a rare, open-minded conversation. Kong Xiao smiled and cut the apple into 4 pieces. He passed one to Teacher Kong. Eat some before cooking. Teacher Kong took a bite and found it sweet. Then, he continued cooking. In the living room, Su Mo felt uneasy. It was clearly her own home, but with Kong Xiao and his mother around, they made her feel as though she was a guest. She felt uneasy, as though she was sitting on a needle. Kong Xiao came over and sat beside her. Why aren't you watching TV? Su Mo lowered her voice. When are you leaving? He stuffed a piece of apple in her mouth and wrapped his arm around her shoulder. I told my mom I'm not leaving. I'll sleep here tonight. Su Mo's eyes widened and she glared at him. Kong Xiao, he smiled and pinched her cheek. I'm lying to you. You believe me? Su Mo was still staring at him. Anyway, you have to leave after eating. Kong Xiao didn't say anything and just stared at her. Su Mo turned his head away and ate his apple fiercely. He smiled and leaned over. I'm going to see what my mom cooked. When Kong Xiao got up, Sue Mo was still eating the apple, biting it hard. She felt a little confused. This scene seemed to be a family of three. Kong Xiao went to the kitchen to help his mother. His cooking skills were not bad, so it was a waste of his talent to help his mother. Mrs. Kong was also very happy. It had been a long time since she had been so close to her son. She lowered her voice and said, "Are we being particularly unkind?" "Mom, if you don't have a thick skin, how can you get a girl? You don't know how difficult it is to get Sue Mo. Look at her these days. Has she been touched?" Kong Xiao was a little depressed when she thought of how Sue Mo used to call her a bitch. Kong Laosher only smiled. He picked up the pot and made a pot of delicious chicken soup. He also steamed the shredded white fish and stir-fried 2 other dishes. Kong Xiao brought the pot over. Sue Mo stood up and said, "Let me serve the rice." At first, Kong Xiao refused, but after thinking about it, he smiled. All right, end of chapters. Chapter 4106. Sue Mo felt that he was acting strange. When she went to wash her hands, she called Wen Yuan. "Wen Yuan, are you really not going to eat with us? The atmosphere here is weird. It's like meeting your mother-in-law." On the other end, Wen Yuan smiled. Sue Mo had finally come to this realization. She didn't say anything and only said, "Teacher Kong is a very nice person." "Yeah, it's great. It's too great." Sue Mo muttered softly. Then she told him to drive and come over to keep her company when he was free. Wen Yuan nodded and hung up the phone. He went to Yi Mubai's company to have dinner with him. Yi Mubai came back from the drive and was surprised to see Wen Yuan in his office. "Secretary," he smiled. Wen Yuan didn't want me to say it. Yi Mubai rolled up the documents in his hands and tapped Wen Yuan's shoulder. "Are we eating here or out?" Wen Yuan saw the faint exhaustion on his face and smiled. "Let's eat here. Just eat what you usually have. You don't have to do it on purpose." Yi Mubai turned around and said something to Hina. "Secretary," he nodded. "Just wait for a while." After that, she went out to do it. Yi Mubai took off his coat and threw it on the sofa. He loosened his tie and sat next to Wen Yuan. "How is Sue Mo? Why aren't you eating with her?" Wen Yuan glanced at him and sighed. "It's not my turn to be there with Teacher Kong Xiao. Don't you think it's weird for me to keep her around?" Yi Mubai smiled and put his arm around his wife's shoulder. "Look at how jealous you are." "I'm not jealous." Wen Yuan was furious. He was still smiling. "I'm the one who's jealous, okay? I can't stand seeing other people in love." He leaned in and bit her ear. "Mrs. Yi, when are we going to be in love?" Wen Yuan patted his handsome face. "Be serious. Secretary, he will come in at any time." "She doesn't dare to. She knows that I will fall in love with you at any time." CEO Yi smiled happily. He restrained himself and only kissed her on the cheek. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something. "Oh, right. Did you know that Wan Yun is no longer Kong Xiao's manager? She has chosen another male artist to be her manager. Looking at his hot looks, I can't deny that Wan Yun has a good eye for talent." When Yuan looked at him for a long time before he said in a low voice, "It was because of Sumo Kankyo that they ended their collaboration." Yi Mubai threw her a look. "What do you think?" When Yuan was not sure at first, but now he was sure. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Kong Xiao and Sue Mo are very suitable. Actually, they're both lonely. I've said it before. One of them is a demon, and the other is an angel. They complement each other." Yi Mubai rubbed her face. "But you didn't believe me." When Yuan looked at him, "Not many of your words are true." "I love you." "That's true," he said suddenly. "Wen Yuan, do you want to do this?" Fortunately, Secretary, he pushed the door open and came in. In his hands were a few wooden bento boxes that looked very exquisite. "Secretary," he placed it on the table. "Enjoy your meal." After saying that, he ran away. Because CEO Ye's hand was still on Wen Yuan's waist, she didn't dare to continue watching. "Eat." Yi Mubai opened the box. Wen Yuan took a look. The dishes inside were probably made by the chef in the villa they used to live in. She looked at him. Yi Mubai smiled faintly. "I knew you were coming, so I made an extra set." End of chapter. Chapter 4107. When Yuan was eating, Su Mo had already finished eating. Kong Xiao saw her put away the bowl, so he immediately got up. I'll help you to your room to rest. Su Mo refused subconsciously. No, I can walk by myself. Kong Xiao didn't force her. Okay, you sleep first. He sat down and continued to eat with his mother. Teacher Kong always felt that the mother and son were a little unkind, but for his happiness, she could only be thick-skinned. She finished eating and said softly, then I'll go first. I'll come when I'm needed. She always had to give him some private time. Kong Xiao nodded and sent her to the door. He wanted to say something, but didn't say it. Teacher Kong thought for a moment and said, Kong Xiao, Su Mo is a good girl. If you are together, you should cherish her. You're not young anymore. You know what I mean. Kong Xiao felt a pain in his heart and nodded gently. Teacher Kong was a little relieved and left. She still had classes in the afternoon, so she had to take care of Su Mo when she was not there. Kong Xiao closed the door and wanted to smoke, but he gave up after thinking about it. He went to clean up the dishes, wash them, and carefully washed his hands. Then he quietly walked into Su Mo's bedroom. She was asleep, probably because she hadn't come back to sleep for a long time, and she didn't sleep well in the hospital. She was particularly heavy at the moment. She didn't wake up when he came in. Kong Xiao didn't want to take advantage of her, but he was a mature man after all. After confessing his feelings, there had been no opportunity to get close to her. At this moment, she was asleep. He quietly walked over and sat down gently. His fingers touched her face uncontrollably. After a while, he uncontrollably lowered his head and kissed her. The kiss was shallow and slowly, unable to satisfy him, he gently pried her lips open. His superb skills made Su Mo feel very comfortable in her sleep. At first, she passively endured it, and then, when he withdrew, she discontentedly hugged his neck. Her red lips slightly opened, and her voice was hoarse. Kong Xiao, what's wrong? Then she also woke up. When their eyes met, Su Mo's face was a little red. She bit her lips and looked away. Taking advantage of me, she looked at her watch and secretly thought that Teacher Kong had left. So, she revealed her true nature and kicked Kong Xiao. Kong Xiao didn't dodge, and this kick happened to hit old Kang's descendants. You really are. He bent over and covered the place where he had kicked. He slowly laid down to catch his breath. Su Mo was also frightened. It couldn't be that something bad had happened to him, right? She did not want to be forced to take responsibility. Just as she was about to lean over to ask, her waist was grasped by his palm, and she fell onto the soft bed. Kong Xiao then covered her. He carefully propped himself up so that he wouldn't crush her. He clasped her fingers tightly so that she wouldn't have a chance to escape. His voice was hoarse, so cruel. As he spoke, he kissed her soft lips. It's just that I didn't satisfy you by being so heavy-handed. Emrich. The corners of Su Mo's eyes were wet as she was trapped by him. She bit her lip and said, Let me go. Kong Xiao, what are you doing? A look of hurt flashed across his handsome face. After a long time, he said in a low and hoarse voice, I just care. I just want to be with you. Su Mo, are you saying that those who have missed you are not qualified to love? She struggled again, but she couldn't break free. She didn't want to get herself injured because of an argument. Besides, he couldn't really do anything to her in her current state. So, she softened her body. Anyway, it's not you. In a chapter. Come and read the latest chapter. Chapter 4108. Kong Xiao looked at her and smiled faintly. How is it not me? Besides me, who else do you want to be with? Jimo's face was still on the side. Suddenly, Kong Xiao took out a piece of paper from his pocket and stuffed it into her hand. This is the betrothal gift, he said. Su Mo was a little confused. She picked it up and thought it was a property certificate or something, but when she took a look, she was stunned. It was nothing else but an HIV test report. Kong Xiao smiled slightly. Negative. You don't need to check again in the future because there won't be anyone else. As he said that, he kissed the tip of her nose and rubbed her neck. Now, do I have the right to be with you? Su Mo was speechless. She was angry and amused at the same time. She was afraid that he would act recklessly, so she put her hand on his shoulder. That's not how it works. Kong Xiao's eyes darkened. He kept staring at her and called her name. Suemo. I'm not young anymore. I've long passed the age of impulsiveness. I really want to be with you. Suemo was silent for a long time before she whispered, I can't give you anything. I only have a home of love, and it depends on money. I can help you. Kong Xiao whispered, I don't want you to work so hard. She stared at him for a long time before she whispered, Kong Xiao, this is a huge trap. People like you don't do things that are disadvantageous. Let's forget about us. I remember how well you've treated me these days, but feelings can't be expressed just by being touched. What about the body and flesh? He looked at her with a burning gaze. I want you, what about you? He knew that she didn't have a man, and maybe she didn't want to have a man. There was always a need, right? Suemo was shocked by his words and couldn't make a sound for a long time. Later, she reluctantly said, This has nothing to do with you. Kong Xiao's thin lips covered her ear. We can try. This time, I will be loyal. She didn't dare to believe him, or she didn't want to believe him. Kong Xiao's eyes fell on her face. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, Suemo, I won't give up. Let's live together first. You can test me. As he said that, he leaned over and kissed her. His voice was a little vague from now on. She moved a little clenched, but he held her wrist even more tightly, and his voice was low and hoarse. Don't be afraid. I won't really come unless you're willing to sit on me. What happened next was a bit hard to explain. Suemo never knew that Kong Xiao didn't mind doing it for a woman. No matter what, Kong Xiao decided to stay here. In the first few days, Teacher Kong would come over to cook from time to time. Later on, she didn't come at all. Anyway, Kong Xiao knew how to cook. After a week of recuperation, Suemo had put on some flesh. Her face was no longer as thin as before and looked a little rounder. She sat on the sofa watching TV, holding an apple in her hand, which was peeled by Kong Xiao. She was so focused that she did not notice that Concho was sitting beside her. He was dressed in his home clothes, and some of his things had been moved over. Sometimes when there was an important event, he could go back to his own place to change, but the place was still too small. He had told Suemo more than once, but she refused to move in with him. Kong Xiao did not say anything. He sat beside her and reached out to pinch her face. He smiled and said, What are you watching? A variety show. Sumo's eyes were still glued to the TV, and she did not move away. Chapter 4109. Kong Xiao was a little dissatisfied, so he picked her up and put her on his lap. Suemo wriggled a few times. Kong Xiao, what are you doing? Kong Xiao held her waist and put his face against the soft flesh behind her ear. You really don't treat me as a man or a nanny? Suemo bit her lip. I'm watching TV. He kissed her, and his voice was a little hot. You can continue to watch TV. It won't get in the way. He caught her by the waist, turned her face towards him, and kissed her, unable to restrain himself. Suemo bit his lips. I can't watch TV anymore. I was wrong. He chuckled. Let's go back to the bedroom, huh? Saying that, he carried her in his arms. Suemo struggled in his arms. No, I want to watch TV. I want to do it. He whispered in her ear. After so many years of service, you have to give me some benefits, right? If I continue to endure it, it will break. Sumo's face was a little red. Her fingers hooked around his neck, and her thin fingers rubbed gently on his slightly thick and hard muscles. She didn't say anything, seeing that she acquiesced more than she resisted this time. Kong Xiao went back to the bedroom and kicked the door. He stumbled to the bed while kissing her. Sumo's dress was very convenient, so he got it up in a few seconds. But Kong Xiao hesitated for a moment and said in a hoarse voice, Do you have that here? Suemo was confused by his teasing, but she stopped at this time and grabbed his hair impatiently. Kong Xiao? He asked again with a smile. Suemo turned her face aside. Why do I have that kind of thing here? Kong Xiao kissed her. Wait a minute. I'll go buy it. Suemo bit her lip and looked at him. It's so late. Forget it. How could Kong Xiao forget it in such a situation? He got up, tidied up his clothes, and went out with his wallet. Suemo lay on the bed and let out a long sigh. He was really serious. In fact, there was another way. At this time, he was not here, and Suemo was alone, so she could calm down and think about it. These days, he was good to her and serious. She felt, so she did not resist living with him, but only to let him into her life, and she was not ready to enter his. She was still holding back, afraid that she would be hurt. She told herself to stay like this for the time being. Not getting married and living together was actually very good. Perhaps in a month, half a year, or a year, Kong Xiao would naturally leave when he felt tired. Then she could move somewhere, change everything, forget about him, and start over. Just as Suemo was thinking this, Kong Xiao returned. There was a faint sound at the door, and then Concho closed it. His steps were quick, as though he could not wait to enter. Suemo leaned against the side of the bed. At the door, he took off his coat, then his belt in a hurry. When he covered her, he nibbled on her soft lips and whispered, "I haven't had a woman for almost half a year. Am I very obedient?" Following that, there was only chaos and an impatient Yuan. Both of them had been single for a long time, and they had been in love before, so there was no need for words. He always cared about her body and did not dare to enjoy it too much. He only dared to let her go after 2 times, but he was not enough. He went to the bathroom to take care of himself, and then came back. Suemo was a little tired and fell asleep, lying quietly. It had been a few months since they last had sex. This time, she did not regret it. She just regarded it as a man and a woman having sex. Chapter 41:10. Kong Xiao knew what she was thinking, but he didn't say it out loud. He changed into a bathrobe and lay down beside her. "Shall I take you to wash?" Suemo turned her body sideways and rested her face on his shoulder. "No, I just want to lie down." Kong Xiao thought for a moment and leaned over to look at her belly. He was relieved to make sure that the operation was fine. He lay down and looked at Suemo. "Are we officially living together?" Suemo opened her eyes and looked at him through a slit. Kong Xiao smiled and kissed her. "Let's go to sleep." She buried her face in his arms and smelled his nice scent. She vaguely asked herself if she regretted it. In the end, she didn't. Suemo thought that's it. He wanted it, and she was willing to give it to him. As for what she wasn't willing to give, it was still the same. From that day on, Kong Xiao and Suemo were living together. He never avoided the fact that he had a girlfriend, and he didn't hide the fact that this person was Suemo, probably because of the image of a good man. Kong Xiao's popularity soared again. Many people were waiting for him to make an official announcement. Kong Xiao refused the hype because Suemo was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. He just posted a back view on Weibo and wrote, "She is very ordinary, but I like her very much. It should be a lifetime." A lifetime was a very serious word. Even artists didn't dare to use it lightly, let alone a very popular one like Kong Xiao. But he used it, and he confessed it. Kong Xiao's fans were excited. Later, they dug out the photos of Sumo's discharge. Sumo's identity as the sister-in-law of a king was confirmed, and her identity was also dug out. It turned out that she was the founder of Home of Love. For a time, Kong Xiao reached the highlight of his career. Fans collectively asked Kong Xiao to replace Bai Jingting as the spokesperson of Home of Love and be Sumo's husband. Kong Xiao didn't say anything, but Bai Jingting expressed his willingness to partner with Kong Xiao as the spokesperson and contribute to Home of Love. This wave of popularity was very good. Fans said that the artists of Stars Entertainment were no better than those of King Entertainment. In the end, they really did shoot a group of promotional videos together. Then, the fans who shouted for the Kong and by CP shouted their throats. The entertainment circle and Weibo were lively for several days. When Suemo and when Yuan met up, when Yuan smiled. "Do you want to go shopping? I'm not afraid of having my husband snatched away by a woman, but I'm most afraid of having my husband snatched away by a man." Suemo bit on his straw. "Then, the 3 of us will be together. You're making their beds." When Yuan hit her and scolded jokingly, Suemo laughed. "As long as they are willing, I have no problem with that." When Yuan propped up his chin, "How does it feel to be the center of attention?" Sumo smiled and said, I don't feel anything else, but the Home of Love has received a lot of donations, which is pretty good. It could be considered as using celebrities to hype things up. She did collect a lot of money. She sat on the sofa and calculated with a calculator. When Kan Xiao came back, it was already 9 o'clock at night. He took off his coat and put it over her head. He then took her little account book and looked at it. With just a glance, Sumo laughed and pulled the clothes off his head. Kang Xiao, you're too hateful. You've accepted so much money, yet you won't let me take a look? He smiled. Where's the money? What money? Sumo threw his coat aside. It's from the Home of Love. Kang Xiao still smiled. At least buy me a few clothes and treat me to a meal. I'm the one who pulled this wave of traffic, and I even sacrificed my reputation to be with Bai Jingxian. You're the one who's eating the cradle. I'm a little puppy. Sumo snorted. Chapter 4111. Kang Xiao looked at her for a long time before he smiled. Even if it's an old cow eating young grass, it's not Bai Jingxian. It should be you. Sumo rolled her eyes at him and packed up the things. Have you eaten? Kang Xiao was a little surprised. She had been indifferent to him these days. Why would she care about his meals? Sumo waved the things in her hand. Didn't I say I would treat you to a meal? I'll cook for you. Kang Xiao pulled her over and pressed her directly on his lap. His thin lips moved to her neck and rubbed. I'm hungry. I'll cook for you. She patted him. Put me down. But Kang Xiao didn't let her go. He still held her waist and said in a hoarse voice, I'm hungry. Sumo looked at him. His eyes were very clear, which was a man's unique desire to make love. She thought that he didn't touch her in the past few days. As for the reason, it was because her period came and ended today. How'd he know? Sumo's face suddenly turned red. She bit her lips and stared at him. Kang Xiao chuckled. I saw you drank cold water. After that, he couldn't help kissing her neck. Go to the room. The sofa is too hard for you. He picked her up. Sumo struggled a little. I want to eat. Do it once. I'll cook for you. He nibbled on the tip of her nose. He carried her into the bedroom and kicked the door. Sumo was put on the soft bed by him and sank deeply. She bit her lips and hit him, Kang Xiao. Kang Xiao absent-mindedly grunted and began to work quickly. At the critical moment, Sumo refused. Panting, she hugged Kang Xiao's neck and did not let him come. As she spoke, her hot breath blew on Kang Xiao's neck. You're really with me. If there's anyone else, clean up and get lost. He grunted again and then lifted her up. Face to face, he gently nibbled on the tip of her nose. You're willing to let me scram? If I scram, who will cook for you? Who will serve you? Will you be so satisfied? As he spoke, he lashed out at Sumo, making him unable to say a single word. But that was not all. He leaned over and kissed her chin, asking her vaguely if she felt comfortable. Sumo was tortured badly. He didn't know how to control himself, so she scolded him for being shameless and a jerk. Kang Xiao laughed happily. She meant what she said. After she finished, she said in a low voice, let's do it a few more times after dinner. Sumo no longer had the strength to pay attention to him. He turned his face away and kicked him. He smiled and did not get angry with her. He took a tissue and helped her to clean up. He did the same for her and kissed her. I'm going to cook. Hey, Sumo called out. Kang Xiao was a little surprised. I thought you didn't want to talk to me. Sumo sat up and leaned against the headboard. She looked weak and beautiful. She looked at him and then looked around. She said softly, Kang Xiao, you really don't have to stay here every day. My place is too small. And you, I know you're used to living in a big house. They were actually not suitable for each other. What Kang Xiao longed for was really different from what she longed for. Kang Xiao quietly looked at her. After a long time, he smiled lightly. Okay, you move with me. I'll leave. Sumo sighed. Why do you have to do this? Kang Xiao's voice was low. I won't change what I said. I hope you won't change it either. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.